All right, welcome everyone. Happy to see everyone. So today we are here on Zoom on a Saturday afternoon to talk about inclusion. So this is a panel discussion about inclusion in the arts specifically. And the two words that kept coming to mind as I was brainstorming about how to open this meeting were the two V's, voice and visibility. Those two kept coming up as I was researching how to introduce each of you. And so that's how I want to begin, is just to go around the Zoom circle and say a little bit about each one of you as it pertains to our topic, so that we have some context when we hear each voice. So Susan is here, Susan Sygall. Susan is the CEO and founder of MIUSA, Mobility International, which empowers people with disabilities to achieve their human rights through international exchange and development, advancing disability rights and leadership globally. Notably, Susan has created the organization WILD, which stands for Women Institute on Leadership and Disability, which holds, correct me if I'm wrong, over 200 women across 83 nations, 83 countries. And then we have Alito, who is here representing integrated arts and inclusive dance. He is the founder of the DanceAbility method, which works with people with and without disabilities. And also his work sort of encompasses an economic stratosphere and really reaches people across global cultures. So the method of teaching includes not only new ways to teach movement that are inclusive as possible, but also spreading the arts across language barriers, and often making presentations for free in public spaces, which is an activation in itself. And then we have Karen. Karen, maybe raise your hand when I say your name. So Susan is over here. Hi. And then Alito. And then next is Karen. Hi, Karen. So
Hi.
Karen is a professional dancer with a disability. She's a certified DanceAbility teacher and a member of the DanceAbility Performance Company. And she also is a dance practitioner. It's part of her daily life. Her work provides visibility for physical integration in the arts. Yes. So then we have Cynthia. Hi, Cynthia. Cynthia is here representing higher arts education. She's a professor of dance at Western Oregon University, and she often addresses culture and race in her choreography, giving voice to her own heritage and creating an audience lens of multicultural and gender diversity. So really, really capturing voices that aren't often heard and showing us how to engage with those voices in what she does. And then we have Bonnie. Hi, Bonnie. Bonnie also represents higher education. She's the director of the dance department at Lane Community College and uses her platform to promote emerging artists of all kinds across quite the spectrum of ability and experience and contexts of life. She creates diversity in the program's offerings and often creates financial accessibility for the Eugene community to see live dance. And then, of course, I'm Jana. Hi, I'm the moderator for this discussion. So basically, I'll be filling in with questions whenever the conversation comes to a standstill. Otherwise, hoping to leave it mainly open for all of us to volunteer and offering. I've worked in a spectrum of roles in dance education. Mainly, I'm a master teacher of the DanceAbility method and the rehearsal director for the performance company. But I've also had a focus on intergenerational inclusion in my own dance research. Okay, so with that, I thought I'd just pose the main question and we could go from there. So I'll say it once more. Why is inclusion important? And to you from your experience, and how do you create inclusion in your own work? So a little two-part question. Would anyone like to begin?
I will.
Thank you, Susan.
Well, thank you. Thank you, first of all, for this fabulous opportunity. And I just want to, actually the co-founder, and Wild is actually a part of Mobility International. And I know this is Zoom, so you can't see me, but I'm also a wheelchair rider. So just wanted to do that. And for me, as a disability activist, as you mentioned, our organization works globally to advance disability rights and leadership globally. And we use the arts as part of our leadership training. But we have used art. We were just talking before the Zoom started. We just created a mural in downtown Eugene with the City of Eugene, depicting disabled women activists from all over the world and saying loud, proud, and passionate in many languages. That was one way we used the art form. We also, I was just saying, we just did a performance with 2 other MacArthur Fellows. I'm a MacArthur Fellow, and I joined them. And it was talking about the issues of disabled women, but we sort of augmented this message of disability rights and women globally by using a composer who created some music, a world-famous flutist. So we are, in addition to the political work that we're doing around disability, we're really always infusing the arts as just another medium of creativity to get that message across. And then the last thing I'll say, because I know we have these amazing other people and we want to get everybody in, is we're actually using different terminology now. We're saying we're moving from inclusion to infiltration. We feel that inclusion has been rather a passive word and hasn't accelerated the disability rights movement as fast as we would like it. So we're saying both the people with disabilities globally that they should infiltrate all programs, whether it's literacy, education, the arts, and not wait to be asked, because these are our programs and that should be the premise. But we also invite the arts and other international development and leadership programs to also infiltrate and find where disabled people are in the US and globally, and really form bonds of mutual partnership, so that as we can all take our rightful place in the arts and in the community. So with that, Jana, thank you so much for the question, and I will pass it back to you.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate the constant evolution of language as it pertains to inclusion. That seems like always a topic that continues to create momentum as we navigate the issue. Alito, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to also say that Susan is a dancer and she was dancing with me. I think even before DanceAbility began, we toured to Vienna together and many, many years ago. And I just wanted to make one little comment about the infiltration, because it's something in my work also. But then I won't go into my introduction, but we talk about eliminating isolation as opposed to talking about inclusion. Inclusion sounds to me like there's these people in this group and we're going to think about letting you in or not. And so I don't like inclusion for that reason. So we don't even use the word. We generally talk about eliminating the barriers that have us being together. And we talk about that as isolation.
Often also I have come to think of it through the DanceAbility method as a re-education. And so the words urban intervention for the street performances that are mixed abilities choreography, sort of intervening in the regular norm of how we think about things in order for a paradigm shift to occur. Okay, next person. Why is inclusion important? How do you use it in your work? Karen.
So I also like the term infiltration because it reminds me of what I think Susan and I both probably did early on, because we've been in the world of visible disability for a long time. I mean, you know, I think when I got involved in dance, I was really one of very few people who were disabled and doing movement. And for me, it was such a life changer, and it just so totally opened up my whole, world to something totally different, which was, for the most part, my body. that I developed a much different relationship with my body than I had had before. So I think that whole idea of infiltration is empowering to people who are different, I think, racially, or that, you know, we need to take that responsibility and that initiative to join things, even if we think we're not going to be invited. We need to do it anyway. We need to just do it. And I think for me, the way I got started was by seeing a disabled man dancing in Boston in the Festival of Aerial Dance. And it just it moved me so much to tears. I went back the next night. I couldn't believe how courageous he was. And then I decided I wanted to do something like that. And so I think that for me, you know, having a presence in the dance community feels like something I can do to encourage others to maybe step forward and try it out, or to like open up the idea that it's possible for somebody who doesn't have a perfect body to participate in something like dance.
So this is interesting because the question is about inclusion in the arts, but we're all dancers. I think what I try to do with my students, so I've been working in higher education for more than 20 years now. And what I try to do with my students is sort of pull them into the fold of.
She just cut out.
Yeah.
Can you go back, Bonnie?
Invisible disabilities.
Bonnie, can you say that last sentence again? We lost you at bringing students into the fold.
Yes. So teaching at a community college, we have a unique population of students. They're often not privileged. They are often working to pay for their school. Some of them have children, and many of them have, I would say, invisible disabilities of depression, and to the extent that it gets quite serious, where they're in these life-threatening, I don't want to live anymore kind of thing. And to be able to open up the doors of a studio and bring them in and sort of present dance as an exploration of creativity and expressivity and connectivity. Not necessarily that it is to then go out and be in a company and perform, but to have it be as a way of life, as a way of self-regulating, as a way of identifying how we see. So I have worked really hard for particularly the last 10 or 12 years, to try to figure out ways to keep, as the cost of going to school increases, the financial ability of the students to actually participate becomes more and more challenging. And so I've worked to try to figure out ways to make it easier for them to get in the pool and study dance. And some of them, I mean, Alito is working and has worked with a couple of our students, have gone on to be quite successful dance artists and choreographers. So I think it's about like reaching out a hand to somebody who thinks they can't dance because they don't have enough money, because they don't have the right body, because they don't, whatever it is, all of those reasons why they can't, and just to kind of coax them in. We all have bodies. We all are expressive. I heard somebody talking on a Zoom tutorial today that, you know, most of our communication is physical. And as dancers, we explore that to the max, how to communicate through the body. Yeah, and trying to make as many things as I can free.
Mm.
Free. You don't have to pay anything. You can just experience, because it's a huge barrier. And I'm loving the words that we're using: infiltration and was it intervening or interweaving?
Weaving.
Interweaving, right. Yeah. Sometimes our culture doesn't even know that dance or art or performance art or whatever is something that they really need.
Mm.
So we bring it out into the world. Now we're doing it through a computer, but some of us do site-specific work. And it's a way to connect us and to elevate hearts and start conversations and get people thinking differently. So that's what I have today.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Mm-hmm.
Much of what you said reminds me to keep in mind that inclusion, infiltration, accessibility is so multifaceted. So it's not just about having curriculum that's available for people who learn in different ways, but also it's anything that creates a barrier. So a narrow doorway for a wheelchair user, or a fee for someone who is not socioeconomically privileged. It's just this entire spectrum of barriers that we come up against that we're working to dissolve or create pathways through. Can we go to Cynthia?
Sure. I think some of the obvious reasons that inclusion and representation are important in general is so that different stories can be told, right? Like all of you and the work that you do and the work that I do. And I think those stories, it's important that they have a real personal perspective. And so the more diversity we have in people making work or in front of students teaching, that's going to be available. I think it's also important because if there's not inclusion or representation at not only at the artistic level, but at the decision-making level, I think that's really important, because I think we forget sometimes, and especially as an artist of color, like I'm always looking at through the world through this lens. But I think as artists, we do love and celebrate so many things that sometimes that we forget that actually dance is a real experience of privilege. It's not only curriculum, but just the whole structure itself is based on a Eurocentric model. And I think that if those same people are the ones in the decision-making roles, it's not really going to shift that much. And it's like Alito says, we'll be invited in, but the world will still belong to this kind of thing, and or to that perspective. So I think that that's really important, because different communities of color process information differently, and they make decisions differently, and they express themselves differently. And I think, so that's just really important to remember that, and to have a host of representation at any table that's being, because it'll just make everybody smarter. And in my case, instead of asking people of color to come into this thing that already exists, perhaps there can be a little bit more commitment to how we are even looking at everything. In my own work, the ways that I try to implement this and exercise this are, as a choreographer, the stories that I tell through my dances, the casting of the works. I like to include a range of ages and experiences. Obviously, a diverse background of racial backgrounds, body types. Along with being a artist of color, I've always had a non-traditional dancer body type, and so that is always that's another completely different conversation. But as we are saying here, the body I think dance likes to say that it is mind, body, and spirit, and we celebrate that. And yet the structure is still there that if you don't look a certain way or your feet don't point a certain way, you know, and so this is, again, these are larger things, but it's like, I think we really have to not only say it, and we're saying it and we're doing it, but I think infiltration is a great word. I like that because the people that are really like the big companies that are still making these giant decisions and casting and whatnot, you know, I think they're still very much doing what they've done for years and years and years. So I try to practice that in how I select dancers for my company. As a professor, I also being at Western Oregon, it's a little bit like what Bonnie had described in terms of Lane. We have a lot of first generation students who are paying their own way through school, who are working through school. Western Oregon is just received the title of Emerging Hispanic Serving Institution. So we're at about 23% of our students that are Latinx. And I think you have to be at like 25% to get the official designation, but that's really exciting. And it's really exciting for me to be on faculty at a place like that where I feel that my visibility is making a difference for the students that are in my classes, and not even necessarily dance majors, but just serving the general population of students. And I also find that one way that I try to practice this idea of inclusion is, as Bonnie was saying, lots, you know, students have different ways of learning. They're coming from different challenges in their personal life. And so, you know, I try to make obvious accommodations when necessary, but even in smaller ways of being, you know, understanding what that particular student needs, or like I know they're going to kind of fall off the face of the earth come midterms because this is what they do. And how can I be a support in that way, understanding that they're learning or their stresses change throughout. And I think that I feel empowered to do that, being first generation, to go to college and trying to navigate a lot of things on my own with a lot of support from my family, but they didn't really know what they were, you know, this was all new to them. So yeah, I feel like trying to make space and also open up the question of like, well, what is this dance education? How is it going to serve them in a way that's beyond like they're going to be a performer or a choreographer, you know? And I think that's what a lot of people in higher ed are asking themselves, and we're trying to do a better job of articulating that for our students because we know it's a valuable education to have. And, you know, I think, again, looking at it from through different lenses will be really important.
Thank you, Cynthia. I especially like how you ended there, because for me, one of the biggest reasons why inclusion in the arts is important is because art is more than art. It's a transferable skill that supports everything that we do and how we live and how we're people. And you know, it isn't only advantageous for people who consider themselves creative people. It's a way to learn to be expressive, and like I said, supports many different ways of life. And now I'll hand it over to Alito.
Thank you. Well, in talking about this idea, I like to call this sort of weaving of the web, which is sort of, in my mind, it's a Native American term, actually. And it brings people all together. And for me, I do this work because I need it. I need to be in a space where the world seems real to me, where who I am with is an honest reflection of society. It's not sort of these hand-picked groupings of people, but this is reality. This is everybody. We work with every person on the planet simultaneously. And not only do we do it, we have a way to do it, a method that we can give to other people to know how to do it. It took many years to organize. Like, for example,
just to clarify right now, Alito's speaking about the DanceAbility method specifically.
Yes, I'm talking about when you say I can work with every person on the planet simultaneously, even I don't know how to grasp that concept many years ago. Now, after all of these years of work, I've sort of deciphered it down into 4 things that you need to look for in any group of people to then identify a curriculum that will allow them all to be involved. Those 4 things are: does everyone in the space understand action and response? Is anybody in the space totally blind? Is anybody in the space unable to move from point A to point B? And is anyone in the space totally unresponsive to the world around them? Once you know those 4 things, then you can, in the DanceAbility method, you can design a particular curriculum that assures nobody is isolated and left out. The support platform that goes along with those 4 concepts are the use of what we call interpretation, which means everybody can make, no, interpretation is, Jana.
Help him out, Jana.
Interpretation, oh.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody.
Everybody can make every movement, and any one part of your body can both experience and express every emotion. So for example, if I would say jump, let's all jump together. Each principle of movement is relative to a particular body. So everybody can make every movement. The same thing is true about it with the word interpret. So each person interprets movement in their own way. So you can give instructions that allows people to be empowered and express in their own way. That's one. The interpretation and relativity support the original concept of the 4 elements of inclusion. After that, we have what you call a satellite support team, which are people that work with you to use the practice of improvisation as a way of being aware of everything that's happening around them, and then making choices about inclusion based on being aware of the space. We all have those skills naturally. We also have built into the DanceAbility method a series of exercises that have absolutely no wrong choices. So everybody is always involved, no matter what exercises that you do or how you present them. So we have created a philosophy, but then put it into practical application. And we've now done that also all over the world, and we continue to do that. Okay, that's what I would say for starters.
Over to Susan.
Yeah, thank you for Alito. That was great. I want to, if that's okay, add some sort of things that we use as things that you need to have successful inclusion. And we've got 2 terms that we want to use and we think are very powerful. And one is what we call, and other people also call, the twin track. And the twin track is, I run programs that empower people with disabilities globally. Alito is running, fabulous programs too. And those are sometimes focused programs on people with disabilities by choice. In my case, we're going because we're all disability rights activists wanting to share information and strategies. So that's one track. But the other track is that every person with a disability has the right to go into every single, quote, regular, mainstream, whatever you want to call it, program. And so I think that's really important. And I know now we use a lot the term disrupting the status quo. And for me, in terms of the arts, I would love, like, every parent who has a disabled kid or every disabled kid to grow up thinking, I'm going to go to the regular ballet class. I'm going to take modern dance. I'm going to be blind and be a painter. I'm going to be a choreographer. Whatever they're doing, that they don't have to go to programs that are focused on people with disabilities, but we need to, I had this fabulous experience where I have danced since I became disabled, before I was disabled. So I went down to the Eugene Ballet and I just signed up for the regular ballet class. And again, remember, I'm paraplegic and wheelchair. And I loved it because nobody blinked an eye. There was like, okay, you're in the regular ballet class, and I was up there doing everything. And then people were in rows of 3 and said, you're going to go 1, 2, 3 and jump and arabesque and all this. And I was just in my chair and I twirled and arabesque. So I really liked for us to see every dance class, every person with every type of disability. And I love your idea where feasible to have those classes be free, so that when you look at a quote, a non-specific, non-disability focused program that's filled with people with all types of disabilities. And then, so that's the twin track. And the second thing is, I think you can't talk about inclusion and filtration unless you talk about reasonable accommodation and budgeting for inclusion. So every class or every program, every curriculum has to have the funds that if a person needs a personal assistant to help them out, they need a sign language interpreter, they're a person with an intellectual disability who needs a support person, we have to budget so all those reasonable accommodations are included. And just lastly, in the performance that we just did recently, that we'll be sending out the video, we have the performance audio described. It has ASL interpreters. We use certified deaf interpreters since we work globally and people with deaf don't use the same sign language. We put it in Spanish. We have captions. So I think just, for all those people, listening to this, to really think about, all the things Alito said and all the other fabulous panelists said, and include in that whole list the twin track approach. Everyone has the right to go to every single program. And second, you've got to budget for reasonable accommodation, because sometimes those are the things that will, level the playing field. And as I think we can add to reasonable accommodation too, the ability to financially be able to participate. So thank you, Jana, and back to you.
Awesome, Susan. It occurred to me listening to all of this that we're all in these different levels of where we are and what we can do and what access we have to the people that we directly work with, and that there are other layers of the stratosphere that also need to consider inclusion, such as the people who make the budgets and the people who decide the budgets and the boards and the higher elements like Cynthia mentioned. And it makes me think, what can we do to help the future have more of that present? And so having representation in these higher decision-making contexts, it occurs to me that everyone in this meeting works to allow for career pathways for people who are marginalized, who have disabilities, who are on the fringes, or who are otherwise face barriers. And so I think that's kind of what I want to segue into next, I think, is maybe, what other tools or resources do we need or can we manifest to help to continue to encourage these professional career pathways for the people who are passionate about inclusion, who maybe have had the experience of being excluded or marginalized. And anyone can raise their hand if they are so inclined.
Well, I think thinking about higher ed, it's tricky because art in higher ed is always a little bit marginalized anyway. So I think in terms of funding, scholarship availabilities for students, I know that we see less than other programs might because of endowments or, private scholarships by alumni who have gone off. And so I think just by the nature of what we do in our field, and there's not always a lot of turnaround in terms of the, 6-figure incomes and whatnot. So, one of the things that I see is that if there were more available funds for these kinds of scholarships, I think more students would be able to go into higher ed specifically, because it's just every year, it feels like tuition is going up and up and up and up. And it's, this is it's a crisis. And so I feel that if in our case, sometimes we have students who come and they pick another major and then they're a dance minor. because their parents aren't necessarily comfortable at first with the full dance major, and that's understandable. They want to be able to, if they're going to pay this money, they want their child to have some kind of career path that's maybe a little bit more stable. So we are trying to change that conversation, like I was saying earlier, about how we can talk about the skills of dance and the skills of a dance major that can, point you in many different directions. But just to go back to answer the question, I think that if there were a little bit more availability of resources for our students, they could have a little bit more freedom in how they can make that decision to go to school, come out with less debt than they might have normally, and then we are putting more people in the field that come from diverse backgrounds, right? Because if only the same people are continually able to go to college, and now this is just one example of perhaps maybe going to college and then getting your undergrad and then your MFA and then going into higher ed to teach, right? So it's this, if I'm looking at that particular pathway, it has to start somewhere. And we could back it up even further to say, well, more financial assistance for children who are wanting to study dance. Because I was always I grew up in Phoenix, it's completely diverse there. And I was always the only brown kid, in my studio. And I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now I think, oh, well, it had to start from right there. If you ever aspire to have perhaps a profession or a career in higher ed. So I don't know, I guess it always comes down to the mighty dollar bill, but that's sort of a practical thing of if there was, I think about U of O, if only Uncle Phil could put a little bit towards the arts, like what an impact that would have, for everyone. So, yeah.
Alito.
Just to reference what Cynthia said about building a culture of dance that's accessible for everybody. And I'm meaning accessible way beyond just people with disabilities, but accessible for everybody. In our company, we have Kelsey, who considers herself a professional dancer now. She started taking DanceAbility classes as a 6-year-old with cerebral palsy. And now, 15 years later, she's a professional dance company, in our professional dance company. And I think that's pretty awesome. And I think that it's important that what's been important for me is to not only do what I do, but to write it down and to get people to help me clarify what it is and what works and what doesn't work to save other people time. And there's a lot of criticism of my work and my trainings in the world because I let anybody come to learn, and they can go on to become teachers. Not any person anyway, but an extremely broad spectrum of people are able to be teachers. And a lot of other people in the field of work that I'm doing say they should have more credentials before you let them be teachers. And the people we're talking about have no opportunities to get any credentials, so that wheel will keep spinning itself. So what I've decided to do is to continue to develop my materials and my resources to continually support being able to give my work away so other people can make it their own work and make their own job. And in that process, also train them about some of the things that it means to have a business organization like Susan is talking about. How do you reach out to get volunteers to help you build a program? How do you get funding? How do you get grants? All of those things. And if you don't know how to do it, how do you get people to help you do it? How do you build your own satellite team to support you? Like in this moment, for example, you are a satellite team for what we're talking about. And so in the training and what we do, I think it's essential that they don't only learn how to dance, but they learn how to organize. They learn how to administrate. They learn how to, or if they don't learn, they get people in their organization or in relationship to them to help them do that. And hopefully that starts to make baby steps out of the culture of dance up the ladder until eventually we reach those people in the higher positions.
Bonnie.
I'm being careful to mute and unmute myself because my dogs are at the moment quietly, but anything could set them off. Um, I think what's interesting right now, and I can report from my own institution that, you know, we are, all of us, sitting in the strangest, probably one of the strangest times of our whole lives. And the reason that we're not in a panel is because we can't be together because of the pandemic. The educators all across the world have been charged to go from face-to-face to moving online. I was just talking to Alito prior, you know, I have 5 classes that I'm going to be teaching online starting on Monday. The administration was pleasantly shocked by the arts division's ability to mobilize and get their classes online and move to this new format fluently, with, you know, some bumps for sure and some resistance. But as a group of people, as a group of educators, we've been able to make that transition with without a lot of, let's say with less, let's say, problems and issues and stopping places than other areas of study. And it's because I think for me, myself, I don't, making this transition has been one that I was never looking forward to, but it is, I feel like the training that I've done as an artist has prepared me to be able to problem solve my way through this, and to be able to not know what it's going to be like and still go forward. And that, being an artist and a dancer and a choreographer, especially a choreographer, making something where I have no idea what it's going to be in the end, yet investing in it over and over and over again for hours and hours and hours without knowing what I'm making. And I feel like there's a certain kind of, to get back to Jana's question, I think that this will be noticed, that the artists have solved problems swiftly, creatively, intelligently, fluidly, to move through and to navigate through this, you know, horrific moment in history. So who knows? Somebody's got to be watching. Somebody's got to be listening and paying attention. Somebody who makes important decisions. So.
Yeah, we've been talking about the same thing at our institution, and just how the importance of adaptability, and artists are really good at that. And even though none of us, we'd rather be in the spaces with our students, I think it's really just giving us an opportunity to, if, you know, it's like with any kind of creative project, when you have a parameter, then it sometimes the problem solving, I don't know if easier is the right word, but just you're forced to think about things in different ways. And I also am really hopeful for our students as well, even though I think they're going to have a little bit of a, you know, it'll be ups and downs a little bit at the beginning of the term, especially, but I think that perhaps it will remind them the power of dance and how it can be transformed even in a smaller space, and maybe a bit of, you know, I think we can take for granted sometimes, like, oh, these big, beautiful spaces that we have and the physical connections that we have. And so my hope is that it's not that we'll go back to being the same, but better, different.
I want to use this opportunity to speak a little bit on the subject of our present moment, because I think it's important to say, since we're all here for that, that you know, we always, I hope I can say this clearly enough, we talk about the importance of inclusion as the presence of diversity allows us to learn more, because we are able to see from new perspectives and see new ways to jump. All of you, new ways to jump, new to me, you know. Diversity creates more opportunity for learning, especially according to the philosophy of DanceAbility. And in those in those terms, we've got these limitations sometimes that allow for possibilities. And in this case, the limitation of us not being able to be together is creating this possibility for the material to be available in an entirely different platform that does serve a part of our population that, for example, can't leave their houses or learns visually only. And so it's helpful to have the focus of just looking at a screen, or, you know, so there's a variety of benefits to creating a new, or to be focusing on this simple platform as an accessibility statement. So there's a little bit of I think, radical accessibility happening now as a response to the limitation of what the pandemic's doing. And with that, I want to note the importance of accessible marketing. And Susan said a little something about it earlier, like always captioning your videos, always having alt image text on your posts, which means descriptions of, in addition to photo descriptions, so that people who are blind, who are listening to their Facebook, can understand what an image looks like. Just various things that are very easy to incorporate that really not only make things accessible, but make the statement that this is what we should be doing, so that it becomes more of a normal thing. And I wondered if, that being said, if anyone has like an anecdote to share of an example where this platform ended up being a bit surprisingly beneficial or surprisingly helpful to a student of yours, or something like that. I know we're only a couple of weeks into this, but if anyone wants to say anything, I know Alito's given various warm-ups in the past week to people all over the world. So maybe you could start, Alito.
He's muted.
Muted.
Still is.
You're muted still. I think you double clicked. There it is. Oh, nope, muted. There you go.
Okay, can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I have had a few problems that I've encompassed, which I haven't solved yet, so that I could have a greater outreach. What I have done is I've led warm-ups with as many as like 45 people from 15 different countries through the Zoom. And they're a general warm-up that is available to most people, but not to everyone, because there's a certain social consciousness that supports people that have no understanding, or that we don't know how they understand. So they're able to be in a class without understanding language, without understanding instructions, but because of this social intelligence of how people are together, they learn from being, and they teach just from being themselves. And the curriculum is able to continue, and the warm-up is able to continue. However, in this situation, I can't have a autistic boy sitting alone in the corner in his house, feeling necessarily involved. Mm-hmm. So some of the things I'm dealing with, but nonetheless, without facing those problems, what has happened is I've done these warm-ups. They last 40 minutes, and people from all over the world, we dance together, we warm up together, we ground, we heal, we cry, we do a lot of things during that process in the space that some people have said things like, well, I've been trapped, but I don't feel trapped anymore. I've been stuck in this room. Well, I love this room now. You know, based on how you develop a relationship to where you are in the present moment and what you have. And it's been really exciting to be leading a basic general warm-up to all these people, and that it does a lot more than just gets them dancing, but that also. And then we talk afterwards about the experience. So that's been a great idea that's worked. And
maybe wasn't something necessarily that DanceAbility put a lot of effort into, if not had this happened. And so now we've got this sort of different facet of reach based on the situation.
Exactly. And to tell you the truth, I think Bonnie would align with me in this. I wouldn't have believed it could work. I'm kind of a skeptic in that. It's like, I want to touch you. I want to be there with you. And if I can't have that, it's not going to work. And it's like, oh, yes, it does. So I've been surprised.
Someone, I've taken quite a few Zoom classes this last couple of weeks, and I took one with a woman in Finland who's a DanceAbility teacher, actually, Sally Davison, and it was not a DanceAbility class, but it was a somatic body class or something. And one of the things she said that I thought was really interesting was what she wanted to help people sort of come to in this sort of crazy two-dimensional world here that is a three-dimensional sense. So instead of looking at a screen and just thinking of it flat, you know, she just was encouraging us to look at it and feel the three-dimensionality of it. And of course, we weren't looking at the screens while we were doing the exercises, but even just as you're doing the exercises, to feel sort of the three-dimensionality of it. And then to also use objects in your space, because those are things you actually can relate to, communicate with, and move with, and yeah, which I thought was really it was really fun and interesting. So we're not really necessarily in two dimensions if we can expand our imaginations to, you know, invite more of what we're seeing into our experience.
I think one other thing that's been interesting that it's sort of forced upon the institutions especially is the understanding of privilege of internet accessibility and equipment, you know, and I think they really, I think most schools have stepped up, and, you know, they're you know, putting a lot of equipment on loan for students and who need it. I know my daughter, she's a senior at South Eugene, and, you know, they put out a good survey to find out what families needed what. And that feels like, gosh, why would it take a pandemic to do that? Like, students need those basic things, and especially in this digital age, or the fact that somebody might not have internet. Like, it seems so dark ages, but I think that's been a positive thing, actually, that it's forced us all to kind of check ourselves and be like, oh, doesn't everybody have a laptop and a tablet and a smartphone? And the fact is they don't. And it's been I think that's been hopefully once things go back to normal, there can still be a way to support those families that need those things. Because even if we don't have to learn this way, that's a resource for them for homework and research. And you know, there's just like, so that to me, I think has been maybe a positive, be it forced onto a lot of organizations to have to answer those questions. But I'm hoping that can be more long lasting for the students and the resources that they have available to them.
Also, I feel like having to do with time management, the fact that we have these really wonderful educational resources then taped, so that we can not necessarily have to have to feel so pressured to access our ultimate learning concentration awareness at the time of the teaching, but then we can go back and review, and, you know, and so I think that's useful. I have attention disorder, and it is so difficult for me to learn in real time. Sometimes it's really helpful to go and revisit. And so that's something that I feel like is going to make learning more accessible for people with ADD and ADHD, certainly. and the other example that I can think of is my sister, who I'm quarantined with, broke her foot, and she is temporarily disabled, can't walk so much at the moment. And so this term in school, she's a student, is going to be really better for her because everything's online, and she'll be able to stay at home and heal through her injury. And so maybe something that is less accessible, sort of, we consider this like a bummer, is something that's really advantageous in other contexts if we can consider the diversity of humanity in the world. So we've been going for almost an hour now, and so I would just like to make a statement quickly about the fact that this panel wasn't meant to come up with any solid resolutions or to really make any final statements, but just to put some words to this topic and to hear from the different voices in regards to the topic of inclusion in the arts. And so with that, I would love it if everyone could go around, and any closing remarks you would like to add, or if you don't have a closing remark, maybe a couple of words that stuck out to you from the talk, and then we can all end together. So with that, I'll pass it off.
Right. Well, I can, I'm happy. Well, first, I just want to say a really big thank you to all of you, Alito, and everybody here on this panel for having this panel. And it's really been an honor. And I just feel, my gosh, that all these dancers, I feel like we should have all do a dance or something at the end of this panel. I know when this is done, I'm going to put on some music and rock out or do something. But I just want to say, I think we've talked a lot about, some of those concepts that whether inclusion or infiltration, but we're really talking about the human rights of all people. And I think that's important. I think we've been really talking about building the pipeline of leadership of all people. All of you have spoken about that. I think that's important. And I think we've, mentioned all the other concepts. And I guess my closing words is, during this difficult time, I think many of us have accessed the arts, whether it's, listening to music, watching a performance, in many different ways. There's arts, reading something, a beautiful poem. So I know that, I think of all the many disability rights activists around the world who are having perhaps even a more difficult time during this pandemic, and just really wishing healing and being safe to everybody around the world, and let the arts bring us resilience and joy and strength during this hard time. So with that, Jana, I'll pass it back to you.
Am I on? Yeah. I had a thought about your painting, your mural, Susan, on the side of the building. And it made me think about this word that we use in DanceAbility that's called informance rather than performance. And then I thought that actually that's what we're doing right now. We're doing an informance. We're trying to inform people about who we are and what we do. And I just think it's an essential part of a practice to know that you have the ability to give something away at a time like this. So incredibly grateful to be even amongst a group of people like you. So thank you all very much.
I'm really grateful as well to just get to know some of you who I don't know, and also just to be in conversation like this. And I'm grateful for the city that they found a way to move forward with a new version of National Dance Week through these modified versions. And I think that what's really exciting about it is that I think it's forcing a deeper conversation about the importance of dance in a way that, because I know that they were already going in this direction during the planning of it when things were still supposed to be live and public and together. But I think, you know, we know the power of dance, but sometimes it's, we often bump up against the general public's view of what dance is, and dance is fun and entertaining, and you know it can be those things. We know that, we love it for all those reasons, but I think this time has actually forced us to you know, celebrate dance in this National Dance Week in a different way than not only practically, but also the conversations we're having about it and why it matters. And I think that's something important. I mean, we're preaching to the choir here, but I think it's important for the public, for our Eugene community, for the Oregon community, for the national and international community to remember that it is more than fun. It's more than entertaining. It is like our life's work. And I think that not just having like a fun show with a lot of people from around town and all of the, you know, I think this has really forced a deeper look at the power of dance. And so I'm grateful for that.
Well, I'm really, really happy to hear everybody's perspectives. Really opened my mind. And I think I would just want to encourage all of us and everyone who hears and listens to this to be courageous and be yourself and do what you want to do. Be who you are and show that to others. And I think then and advocate for others in a courageous way. And I think we can change things.
Should I go? Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure sharing some of these thoughts with all of you. I haven't met Susan, really spent much time with you, but everyone else's faces are so familiar here. The other the rest of the panel, and thank you for remembering to thank the City of Eugene to sort of spur this on, because it's important, because there are people inside of the City of Eugene that know how important dance is and want to elevate it in our community. And I want to thank those folks. And, you know, we all have bodies and we all breathe and we all move. And we need to express ourselves. And I'm grateful to have been invited to be able to speak with these wonderful other folks. And, you know, I'm really interested and curious to see what's on the other side of this situation that we're in, and how, pardon? And how we emerge. Mm-hmm. And I guess the last thing I wanted to say was for whatever reason, this pandemic has made me appreciate myself as a dancer more than I think ever in my life. I'm many things. I'm an educator. I'm a continuum teacher. I teach yoga. I'm an animal lover. I do all these things, but this place has set me into identifying the importance and value of dance in life situations. So that's that. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. So yeah, my closing statement will just be a thank you. This panel discussion on inclusion in the arts was sponsored by the City of Eugene's Downtown Program Fund grant and produced by DanceAbility International. So once again, Susan Sygall from Mobility International, thank you. Cynthia Gutierrez Garner from Western Oregon University and from her own professional choreographic practice, Bonnie Samoa from Lane Community College Dance Department Director, as well as independent artist, Karen Daly, professional dancer, Alito Alessi, founder of DanceAbility International, as well as a choreographer, and myself, Jana Meszaros, the moderator. Thank you. I encourage anyone who's watched this who was inspired or has any comments to add to please comment, and as well as you can email info@danceability.com with anything that you would like to add. We want this to be a conversation far greater than with just this group of people, and we welcome any participation in that from anyone. So with that, I would just want to do a little ending movement thing. So any body part you like, bring it up to the screen. And once everyone has their body part near the screen, we're just going to slowly, on my go, move back. We're going to take 10 seconds to move all the way back. And go. Finding an end in a shape that feels good to you. And now from your stillness, change one thing about the shape you're in, or not, and relax. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jana.
Bye.
Thank you.